All right, everybody, where was Dean? All righty, here we are. Welcome in week 8, dash of DFS, toilets to titles. Drop the leash, JC, Joe Irachi here. I got my buddy, 2 tickets to fantasy, Jeffrey Allen Mesha to my left. And Dirty Jobs, our master of ceremonies and our engine, is behind the scenes doing all the dirty work. It's Jeff and I tonight. And Mesh, how you doing heading into week 8?
I'm doing well, brother. Always good to be here. Good to see you as usual. Naturally, we miss Mikey. He's the LeBron James of the crew, but we always miss him. We'll see him tomorrow morning on the Blitz, but you and I will struggle through for the audience, and hopefully we put on a decent one without him.
As long as neither of us are the Russell Westbrook of the crew, I think we'll be all right.
Touche.
I'm looking at week 7 real quick just to kind of jog my memory of like the main fantasy things that happened. And where is Josh Jacobs all of a sudden? I'm about the Raiders and the 38 points that they scored. And Jacobs has gone like for 30 plus fantasy wise 3 weeks in a row, which I mean, Jacobs is in number.
I think, Joe, you might be stalling out on us there, so that may be, hold on, you might be a decent time to plug toiletstotitles.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I think every time you share, they give extra padding to the New York Jets, who I'm pretty sure are wearing leather still. So just make sure you get on top of that. And sorry, Joe, I didn't mean to cut you off as far as the Jacobs thing is concerned, but fire away.
No, man, I'm just saying, looking at last week, Jacobs going for 33 weeks in a row comes to my mind. The Packers sucking again. Like, there's people just dropping Aaron Rodgers in leagues. And, from a DFS perspective, his price, I mean, he's not in the main slate this week. So I didn't see him going through the 1:00 games, but the guy's like under 6,000 now. Like we're talking about a Hall of Fame quarterback who, even with the worst of worst Green Bay teams over the last 10, 15 years, has put up relevant fantasy numbers, and now he's just being dropped. So it's been a crazy 7 weeks. And we'll tell you even more about it. If you're a Patreon of ours, we have 5 different Patreon tiers now. I think 3, 5, 750, 10. It gets you into Discord. It gets you into our Frankenstein lead. It gets you one-on-one advice. The chat rooms have been great lately. We've been getting all sorts of trade scenarios and just stardom sit-em questions that we answer live in the chat, as well as obviously from a stardom sit-em perspective on the Blitz every Sunday morning. But so week 8, Mesh, it's going to be, my Giants playing at Seattle. That's an interesting game and really interesting fantasy-wise too. Geno Smith and Daniel Jones, two guys who have actually been better than Aaron Rodgers. So right off the bat, Geno fucking Smith and Daniel Jones, their worst weeks have been Aaron Rodgers' best weeks fantasy-wise through 7 weeks. Like, I mean, you might as well just drop the mic and head home from there if that's a real stat. But I'll start here with what games are you looking at from a fantasy perspective, Mesh, where you think the points are going to be? And then from an opposite perspective, let's kick it off. What quarterbacks are you fading?
So there's a lot to unpack, certainly. First of all, fading wise, I'm fading Dak at Chicago. He's 7,200 on FanDuel. I just don't think this is the best matchup for Dak. I think he's pretty much kind of getting back into things now. So I don't think that's the best play going forward. Games that I'm really looking at from a stack standpoint, and you brought it up already, amazingly, I think this Giants Seattle game, which we haven't been able to say it in a long time, is a very good stacked game to go after. Also, one, I mean, you got to look at Miami, Detroit. They get the highest over under, at least of the main slate. So those two, you definitely got to look at. But for whatever reason, this Jones, Barkley, Geno, Kenneth Walker kind of thing, I think that'll come out to be pretty good fantasy wise. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the key to that game fantasy wise right now, I think both Metcalf and Lockett are game time decisions. And I'll be honest, DFS wise, I'm actually hoping that one of them can't play because I think it's Marquise Goodwin, who had a great week for Seattle last week, 2 touchdowns. Once Metcalf went out, I would love to be able to throw him in my lineup knowing he's going to start at 4,400. But no, I like that game. I like the Detroit-Miami game. I think there's going to be a lot of points in that game. I think Arizona, Minnesota has some potential also to be one of the more fantasy relevant games. And then the other one too, the Saints and the Raiders. The Saints with the most no-name offense you can really have. They put up some points, oddly enough, one way or another each week, and obviously the Raiders do the same. You know, from a DFS fade quarterback perspective this week, I'm going against my own grain for the whole year. I'm not sure this is the week, and I know you disagree with me because I saw your lineup in advance. I'm actually not sure this is the right week for Jalen Hurts in the main slate. And I'm saying that more perspective on DraftKings because he's like $800 more expensive than any other quarterback in that main slate on DraftKings. Kyler Murray second. And, you know, Pittsburgh obviously is rebuilding. There's no doubt about that. Their offense is a mess. Even though it shows promise, it's a mess at the same time. But they beat Tampa Bay. They held Tampa Bay. They've actually been pretty good defensively. So I feel like, you know, this is a Pennsylvania rivalry, Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Pennsylvania, Philly, Pittsburgh. Even though these teams are on different trajectories, I think Pittsburgh's going to keep this game kind of close. And I just don't think Jalen Hurts goes for 35 fantasy this week. And at his price, if there's any week to fade Jalen Hurts, it's feeling like, you know, this week and maybe when he's at Dallas in a few weeks down the line. But
well, it's funny, Brad, and we will get into it with our lineups, but I could not disagree more. And you brought up a good point. I get it. You said 800 on DraftKings. Jalen Hurts is 1,000 more than the next person, Kyler Murray, on FanDuel. So I certainly get it from a salary standpoint. You kind of want to maybe stay away or look towards somebody else. Jalen Hurts has just been simply the man. Yes, I get it. He's got a couple weapons there as far as receivers. He got Miles Sanders, he's been good. You know, he's put up some yardage. But Hurts is the guy who's really just been simply taking it in the red zone. I mean, if they're inside the 20, it's pretty much been quarterback keepers. So I could not go away from this guy. And on another point you brought up earlier, you want to talk about games and staying away from. I'm staying away from the New England Patriots at the New York Jets. We already mentioned the Jets are playing with leather, so already they're not putting up too much. And I don't even know where the Patriots are going quarterback-wise. I don't even think the Patriots know where the Patriots are going quarterback-wise, so it should be very interesting. You can't trust anybody, maybe Stevenson perhaps, but as far as the wide receivers are concerned, you don't know who's going to who because you don't know who's starting at quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that Bears-Patriot Monday Night Football game is the epitome of the NFL right now in 2022. Like, what the fuck was that? How did that happen in New England? I won't understand it. And, you know, and again, 2022 NFL says that the Patriots will come out this week and look great. I do like Ramondre Stevenson. I mean, the guy has been so good, whether Harris is playing or not, that it's hard there. I mean, the Breece Hall injury ended my fantasy season probably in my most important league. So I'm heartbroken over that. I think it's a slick move, the James Robinson trade for the Jets. I don't think it's going to have any fantasy relevance this week. So I think if you're going to start a Jets running back, it's Michael Carter, although I think that's a tough thing to do against the Patriots. Sure. I agree. The quarterback thing with the Patriots was so bizarre last week. Now we're going back to Mac, and I don't get it. It wouldn't shock me if the Patriots come out on top this week. But I mean, what's it been? 12 in the Jets are 0-12 against the Patriots in their last 12 meetings. Is that the case? Because if 8-12, it's something like that. Whatever it is, this is probably the best shot the Jets have had tomorrow in a long time to beat the Patriots without it being an insane upset. So I will be curious to see that. Let's go opposite from fading. Who are you? Where are you spending your money this week? Who are your most expensive starts of the week in that main slate?
All right. Well, a couple ones. I already brought up one, Jalen Hurts. I don't have to get back into that point. I've got a couple more. One is Saquon Barkley, the Giants at Seattle. He's I think the second most expensive guy on FanDuel this week behind Derrick Henry. Don't ask me why Barkley is behind him. I think he's probably the most valuable guy, especially with how they run their offense. He's 9,500 at Seattle. I have no problem paying up for Saquon Barkley. Daniel Jones has been great, more so on his feet than in the air. And even sometimes when he's in the air, he throws to Saquon. They've been feeding this guy in the red zone and otherwise the entire season. So I don't see any way that slows down against the Seattle defense that isn't what it used to be. And piling on top of that, I'm going with Daniel Jones at 7,500 at Seattle. So maybe this is my stack game. I know I brought up a couple, but this is probably the one I'm going with. I see Daniel Jones. When it's not Saquon Barkley, it's probably Daniel Jones running the football.
Yeah.
So those guys, those three guys, I'm paying up for those specific reasons.
The Jalen Hurts rushing argument is as good as it gets as far as why you would never want to sit Hurts. You're right. The guy could go for 10 and 50 and 2 rushing touchdowns because in the red zone, Daniel Jones, Jalen Hurts, and Josh Allen in the red zone are their team's number one rushing option without a shadow of a doubt. And even with Barkley, I feel like Jones runs more than even Barkley does inside the 10. If you could have one knock on Barkley this year, he hasn't gotten into the end zone a ton, but he's been phenomenal other than that. That Giant Seahawk game, I feel like the Giant, as a Giant fan, I feel like the Giants go to Seattle every year. Last year, I should have looked up the score. I think the Giants beat Seattle like 10-5 last year in Seattle, like out of nowhere. Obviously still Russell Wilson, Seattle. But who I'm paying up for this week and talking about the stack, I'm going with a Miami stack on one of my main lineups. That's Tua at 6,200 and then Tyreek Hill at 8,500 at Detroit. I actually expect Detroit to score some points too, but I expect Miami to score a lot of points. I also expect the Miami defense, even though they're going to give up some points on the scoreboard, I expect them to rack up the fantasy points, whether it's defensive touchdowns, turnovers, whatever it may be. I'm paying up for Josh Jacobs. I'm not a Josh Jacobs guy at all historically, but as I was saying earlier, he's 7,500 on DraftKings, and you can't ignore the production. The guy's gone for 39, 33, and 37 DraftKings points in his last 3 games. And, Denver at KC, not horrible defenses by any means. So I'm paying up for him. And then I am going to spend the 6,400 on DraftKings for Ramondre Stevenson. He's just been way too freaking good for the Patriots over 3 weeks in a row. And I like him, for 6,400 isn't even really having to pay up too bad to get him as my number 2 running back of the week. There's a lot of injuries. I feel like from a DFS perspective, this is the first week where you could make a lineup full of injury replacements and feel pretty good about it. And who I'm talking about when I talk about that is Ezekiel Elliott is doubtful in Dallas. So Tony Pollard, who everybody's been more excited about anyways, he's getting a pure start with nobody in the way for him tomorrow. They're home against Chicago, which, I mean, we just talked about Chicago surprising the Patriots. You would assume the Cowboys are going to be in a running game script all day long. Pollard, I love. On DraftKings, Pollard's coming in at 6,100. I mentioned them before. Marquise Goodwin for Seattle. It looks like Metcalf and or Lockett will not play. Marquise Goodwin is 4,400. He went for 22 DraftKings points last week, 67 yards and 2 touchdowns, once he filled in for Metcalf. James Conner is out again. So that's another start for Eno Benjamin, who went for 23 points for Arizona last week. They're playing Minnesota this week. I'm looking down the line. There's a couple more. There's a couple of guys that maybe Carolina. Let's talk about Carolina real quick. Obviously, they trade McCaffrey. Last week, it was Chuba Hubbard, who went for 20 plus, I believe. Deontay Foreman also went for 100 yards plus on the ground last week for Carolina as they surprised Tampa. Hubbard's out now, so Foreman's got that job all by himself tomorrow at Atlanta. He's only 5,300 on DraftKings. I think, it's hard to resist not putting him in almost all of your lineups just because for 5,300, right, even if he got you 10 to 12 in the flex position, it's worth it. But let's go the opposite. Who is your cheap play of the week? Maybe give me a wide out and maybe a 9 wide out cheap play of the week.
Well, so I got a couple. So from a wide out standpoint, and this is a bit of a Hail Mary because of the quarterback situation. This guy has been targeted maybe more than anybody over the last couple of weeks. But I got Paris Campbell, home versus Washington. He's only 5,600 on FanDuel. I think that's a decent play. Obviously, Matt Ryan no longer there. I've been calling for this for a long time. We just don't know how Mr. Ellinger is, or who he will favor as far as the passing game is concerned. It's a big X factor. So I'm throwing it out there, not 100% confident, but because he's had so many targets and because he's only 5,600, I think Paris Campbell might be, on FanDuel, that is. I think Paris Campbell might be worth taking a shot at. The other guy I'm kind of looking at is Tyler Algier, home versus Carolina. He's only 6,100 on FanDuel. If you're throwing guys in like I just talked about with Hurts and Barkley, you need to kind of find value somewhere. And Algier is almost my take it or leave it for this week, so to speak. For the past 5 weeks, his attempts have gone up each week for the past 5 weeks. And okay, we saw what Carolina did to Tampa Bay, which was odd beyond belief, by the way. I can't see that happening again. And I especially with Atlanta being home, I can see them putting up some points, and I can see Algier at least getting in the end zone once. So those couple guys, and not necessarily a Hail Mary, not far from it though, if that makes sense.
No, but Paris Campbell's got 23 targets the last 2 weeks. Now, like you said, there's this new X factor with the new quarterback, obviously, but it's hard to ignore that. At 5,600 on FanDuel or 4,500 as he is on DraftKings, and I'm playing him in one of my lineups for sure. I'm looking at George Pickens this week for Pittsburgh at 4,700. I mean, this guy, and
you love the name. Just go ahead and say.
Carl Pickens back in the day, the Cincinnati Bengals. That's who I think of every time. But I think it's going to be easy pickings for George Pickens to get that trash.
That's why you love the name. Go ahead and say it.
Get that trash fourth quarter touchdown at Philly this week. Pickens is a monster. He passes the eye test. It's a great receiver corp out there in Pittsburgh, even though they're rebuilding. They have Johnson, Claypool, and Pickens. He went for 6 for 61 and a touchdown at Miami last week, 18 points. His target share the last 5 weeks has been 6, 8, 8, 7. So, he's getting a lot of looks. He's getting a lot of looks in the red zone, and he's just a monster. So I don't think Pittsburgh's going to beat Philly. I don't think they're going to score a ton of points, but I like George Pickens to get some targets. And for 4,700 on DraftKings, I think it's absolutely worth it. Non-wide out, I am going to go, and we talked about them a little bit, but I think I'm going to stick with Deontay Foreman at 5,300 in Carolina against Atlanta. He's going to get all of the carries. Carolina got the win last week, so they're all excited going into this week. I'm not sure what they're excited about. It's not like they're going anywhere, but I understand. Foreman looked good last week against a very good rush, or what's supposed to be a very good rushing defense in Tampa Bay. Now it's Atlanta. So at 5,300, I think Foreman, if he can get you 10 to 15, it's worth it. So I like Foreman in Carolina. It's really funny. Like even DJ Moore had a good week last week. Yeah. So, I mean, they have got no quarterback. They got rid of McCaffrey. They got rid of Robbie Anderson. And now all of a sudden I'm looking at playing Foreman and Moore fantasy wise. It's amazing what 1 week can do in the fantasy world. But
yeah, bizarre. A quick question for you, since we were discussing Paris Campbell and the Colts and everything. Obviously, I wasn't the biggest Matt Ryan fan. Jonathan Taylor has not performed to what anybody would have thought he was going to be. I think he was the consensus #1 overall fantasy draft pick. If he wasn't, I don't know what league you're in, but in any case, do you think the quarterback change does anything to help Taylor at all from a fantasy perspective? What do you think about that?
No, I think it's a great question. And I stared at Taylor a lot this week. So on DraftKings, he's 4th for the one main slate. He's 4th highest salary. Barkley, right. Henry, and McCaffrey are higher than him. And that made me look, because when's the last time Jonathan Taylor has been that low down the ladder? So I'm like, ooh, is there value in Taylor at $8,000 on DraftKings? You know, Washington's not a very good run defense. They seem to be middle of the road. But I'm looking at Taylor. I mean, his last 4 weeks, and he missed a couple, 15, 4, 12, and 7. Those are his DraftKings points. And mind you, DraftKings is a full point per reception. So he had 7 receptions last week. So 7 out of his 15 points were just for catching the ball. He did not 10 for 58. So it's been bad. I don't think when you could pay 400 less for Cook, 500 less for Jacobs, 900 less for Kamara, 1,200 less for DeAndre Swift, I don't think you can pull the trigger on Taylor yet. That being said, somebody's going to be ahead of the curve, because eventually he will have a good game and he will break the slump. But I don't want to pay 8,000 and get it wrong, to be honest. So I'm staying away still. But I think it's a really good question. That's really been who would have thought? Like, you don't normally see a running back like that. And it's not his fault. I don't think it's his fault, but you don't normally see that happen quite like that.
This reminds me of, and I'm forgetting the season. I want to say like 2011, 2012-ish, like the enormous Chris Johnson season. And then anybody who picked him the year after that was like, oh, okay, this guy's all right. But Peterson just demolished him as far as fantasy is concerned. So anyways, it's kind of reminded me of that. And also, you can't fault me, and I'm getting off topic a little bit going into our league, but you can't fault me now for, like, what is this, 3-4 weeks ago, making the trade of, I traded Tom Brady, Jonathan Taylor, and Cooper Kupp for Jalen Hurts and Austin Eckler. You cannot blame me for that one at this point.
I mean, Kupp's been very good, but that was a hell of a deal. It's crazy. I mean, last year, if you think about but there was that Mahomes deal in our league that looked horrible last year for the guy who gave up Mahomes. But in the end, it didn't. You can't do it. Like 5-10 years ago, you could judge these trades. And if you were doing your due diligence, you could. It wasn't nearly as unpredictable as it is now. That's for sure. I got to pause for a second because, so first of all, resident Toilets for Title Giants fan along with me, Joe Clark, says hello. If you're still in here, Joe, thanks for joining us. Let's see if the Giants can pull another crazy win off at Seattle next week or tomorrow. Historically, the Giants have had some crazy games in Seattle. I don't expect tomorrow to be any different, but like 10 minutes ago, I don't know if you noticed, we had a guest, a scarecrow guest who just popped up for about a minute.
I did notice that. I didn't know if it was a mistake. So, I didn't want to get weird about it, you know.
I hope if our other partner George Reed is watching at some point, he'll appreciate that. But it felt like I was all of a sudden in a WWE Bray Wyatt skit. And the Fiend like just popped up, and last night it was Uncle Howdy. If you're a wrestling fan, but I thought we just got I don't know what the hell that was though, but I can't wait to get off of this thing and find out what the fuck that was. But that being said, Mace, bring us home tonight. Throw us a FanDuel lineup for that main slate tomorrow.
Sure. So, I mean, I've already gotten into a few of these guys. We know I'm going Hurts versus the Steelers home, 9,200. Barkley at Seattle, 9,500. Algier at home versus Carolina, 6,100. And wide receiver, I got Campbell at home versus the Commanders, 5,600. The other folks I'm going with are Chris Olave, and hopefully I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's gotten a lot of targets. This has been like Andy Dalton's boy over there. And he's only, and I say only, but truly it's kind of a bargain at 6,900 for FanDuel with Chris Olave. Adam Thielen, you want to talk about bargains. I get it. Justin Jefferson is fantastic, and they go to him a lot. But Thielen is still very viable, especially when you talk about bargains at 6,200, home versus the Cardinals. They'll probably have to put up a lot of points. It might not necessarily be my stack game. I think, more so than a couple others, but I think that we will see some point scoring, certainly. Tight end, sticking with that same game, I'm going Zach Ertz. At Minnesota, he's only 6,000. Flex-wise, I stuck around. A lot of times I've been going wide receiver. I stuck around at running back. I'm going Najee Harris. He's at Philadelphia, 6,600. And a year or so ago, Najee Harris is 6,600. Be like, are you kidding me? I mean, this is a no-brainer. We'll see if he kind of gets back to his old form for again, what seems to be a bargain because I went high on the top end. And then defense, I'm going the Falcons at home versus Carolina, 3,800. I can't think that they would repeat what they did against the Bucs. I may be wrong and look stupid, but I have to think that the Atlanta defense is going to show me something at home versus the meager Carolina Panthers.
All right. I like it. Yeah, I was doing that.
And it's happy hour, Joseph. So cheers. Anyways, go ahead with your line.
To that. My drink is on the other side of the room. All right. We are looking we're looking at a Miami Dolphins stack tomorrow at Detroit. I mean, everybody's been scoring points on Detroit. And I'm really the quarterback slate, unless you do pay up for Hurts, I'm really not crazy about it. So I'm going Tua at 6,200 and I'm stacking it with Tyreek Hill at 8,500. Yeah. Hill's my most expensive player of the week. I'm banking on him catching a bomb for a touchdown. That those Detroit Lions are as loose as the 418 Mace. So I'm thinking this is the week for Tyreek Hill to get in the end zone.
Hey, and if you know, you know.
Yeah,
go ahead.
But we're paying $7,500 for Josh Jacobs at New Orleans. I just can't ignore the fact that the guy's gone for 30 plus 3 weeks in a row. Ramondre Stevenson, 6,400 at the Jets. I think it's going to be another lucrative week for him. We're going to go, I'm going to assume based on the reports you see that Lockett or Metcalf will not play. So Marquise Goodwin goes in my lineup at 4,400. He went for 2 touchdowns last week in Metcalf's absence. George Pickens, who was kind of my cheap play of the week, 4,700 at Philly. Irv Smith Jr., 3,500, tight end, Minnesota. He went for four catches and a touchdown last week, 4 catches 2 weeks in a row. So if I can get that 10 to 12 from him this week, I'll be happy. Deontay Foreman, 5,300, Carolina at Atlanta. I agree with you. I don't think Carolina's going to do much tomorrow, but Foreman went for 100 yards on the Bucs last week with Hubbard playing. Yeah. So I like him for at least a touchdown and, over 50 yards tomorrow. And I like the Dolphins defense, 3,500 at Detroit. Again, I wouldn't be shocked if Detroit puts up some points, but I think we're going to see sacks and fumbles and interceptions and hopefully some defensive touchdowns on that Miami side. And that rounds up my main lineup. I just don't feel like we're bringing the value if we don't talk about like the injuries. Again, it's the week for Tony Pollard potentially. It's another week for Eno Benjamin. Whether it's Goodwin or a Paris Campbell, Lazard's out. Lazard is out for the Packers, and they're not on the 1 p.m. slate, but it's worth talking about. The Packers are playing Buffalo. Lazard's out. Even if they get crushed, Rodgers is going to throw the ball 50 times. Lazard's gone. Cobb's gone. Dubs didn't catch a ball last week, so he's flying under the radar. Just as an example, he's going to have to catch some balls next week because they just don't have anybody else. Or maybe it's a Robert Tonyan week, which gets you a cheap tight end. So really look at that injury wire. Deebo Samuel's out. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is a great play. He's 6,100 on DraftKings this week. He's going to be acting like the number one receiver out there in San Fran, and they're playing the Rams. So, do the due diligence on the injuries front. We'll be back in T-minus 13 and a half hours on the Blitz Mash to, we'll bring you this same info and more 13 hours fresher.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll certainly bring that up more. And you brought it up at the beginning that, the whole report there. Tony Pollard, 6,300. I didn't put him in my, my regular lineup here. I'm certainly playing the guy in a couple other lineups. 63. I mean, that's easy pickings, for lack of a better term.
You got to believe he's going to get 20 touches.
You have to think.
So, that is, FanDuel 6,300 is under your average salary per player. DraftKings 6,100 is right at the average. I mean, that feels like a no-brainer. But as the screen just flashed too, Blitz the Musical tomorrow morning, which means Mike's going to sing us through 90 minutes of starts and sits.
Oh, that'll be phenomenal. And don't forget, to like, subscribe, and share. And for those who missed the beginning of the show, it's because every time you share a New York Jet, they're doing leather right now. You got to help them out. So finish this off, Joey.
Toiletsandtitles.com, videos, articles, NFL, and fantasy content, not monthly, not weekly. We're talking daily, bitches. Every single day we are bringing it. Mike, bring us home. We'll see you in 13 and a half on the Blitz.